Okay. It is 6:01, and I will call this meeting of Lunenburg Town Council to order. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. With that, I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda with the notation of a late-breaking request moved by Councillor Sanford. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Duggan. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And we will add that late-breaking request at 9F. That I need a motion to approve any or all of the past 3 meeting minutes. Someone would like to move that. Moved by Councillor Birtles. Moving all 3, Councillor Birtles. Seconded by Councillor Sanford. Any discussion or debate, errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. A couple of pieces of correspondence to note. There was a grant project funding for the Back Harbor Trail, and the Academy Foundation has generously decided to contribute to those projects that the capital budget required be cut from the town's capital budget. That takes us on to business arising from the minutes or unfinished business. The first item is the Blue Route Hub trial project proposal, and we have Allison Carlisle with us to present on that. So I will turn the floor over to Allison.
Thank you very much, Mayor Visser. Great, yes. So my name is Allison Carlisle, and I work with Bicycle Nova Scotia, and I'm here today to talk to you about the Lunenburg pop-up project. So we can go to the next slide. So a month ago, I was here, kind of, to get a committee approved to work on this pop-up project. And the project is based on a 2019 report from Bicycle Nova Scotia, the Bikeway Concept Design, which created a network plan for cycling infrastructure in Lunenburg. This project is also based on the comprehensive community plan, of which mobility is a key objective, specifically Action 30, which is focused on connecting Old Town and New Town. Next slide. So the next slide is all that in timeline form. So 2019, the BNS report, 2020, the comprehensive community plan. And then in 2021, Bicycle Nova Scotia has been working with the town to move forward mobility in Lunenburg. And we applied for some funding for a pop-up project. And that's, I've got the letter from council in support to apply for funding for a temporary project. So then BNS applied for funding for a temporary project. A month ago, council approved a committee, and we went away with 14 people on this committee to discuss what we could include in a temporary project to push forward mobility in Lunenburg. So next slide. So our recommendation in that project committee is to have a 1-month pop-up project in September, starting the 12th, running to October 9th. And that would be a bicycle lane on Montague Street with a pedestrian mall. So in the next slide, you can see the details of the infrastructure. So what we're proposing is a bi-directional bike lane on Montague Street. You can see there that allows cyclists to travel east and west. There is also physical separation between people biking and people driving. Where there is not physical separation, so at the driveways on the south side of Montague Street, we are proposing green paint to highlight that this is an intersection of where cars can drive and where bicycles will be passing through. So if you move to the next slide, you can see that infrastructure continues from Blue Nose Drive to Duke Street on Montague Street. So parking on the north side of the street will remain the same. The travel of motor vehicles through that space will also remain the same. The width will narrow slightly. However, that still allows garbage trucks, emergency vehicles, delivery trucks, all kinds of things to still use that lane. and again, creates physical separation and safety for cyclists. This is slightly different than the report from Bicycle Nova Scotia in 2019. However, it was felt by the project team that this option with bidirectional on the south side of the street would make cyclists in Lunenburg feel a lot safer to actually use the infrastructure. So the next slide will then show the plan for the pedestrian mall, which will be between Duke Street and King Street. So in this block, this is a pedestrian first space. So vehicles are still able to move through this space, but are heavily encouraged to go around or to travel slowly to make everyone feel safe. So we are proposing signage to encourage people to turn up Duke Street. And then you can see there are barriers at the top of the street on that corner of Duke and Montague. That will leave enough space for emergency vehicles, garbage trucks, delivery trucks, to still drive through that space, and of course, people to access their driveways. But those barriers will act as a gateway, signaling that this is a pedestrian first space and that it's different than a normal street, and that people in driving cars need to behave a little differently. So go a bit slower, watch out for pedestrians. The rest of so you can see, sorry, the sharrows will show where bicycles can move through that space, and other vehicles as well, kind of staying in the middle. And then the rest of that space is open up for all kinds of other things. So right now we've got a plan for 16 bike parking spaces on that block, as well as tables and benches so that people can sit down, rest in that space, and enjoy the beautiful UNESCO heritage architecture on Montague Street. It just, allows people to really enjoy that space. Next slide. And this is just a picture of Argyle Street in Halifax. So I just wanted to show you like an example of kind of a pedestrian first space. This is more of a long-term vision. That's not what we're doing for only September. But that's the kind of feeling that we're going for, that this isn't a regular street. This is for people. Cars are welcome as visitors in this space. Next slide. So the budget for this project is $16,000. Most of that coming through Bicycle Nova Scotia from other funding. And what we would need from the town of Lunenburg is about $4,000 of in-kind support. And that would be for the staff of Public Works to cover their costs, to help with the setup and the takedown of the infrastructure on the street. Next slide. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get the Board of Trade on the project committee. So that meant that us at Bicycle Nova Scotia, we went down to Montague Street and visited different businesses to chat about the project. I've thrown some of the comments that we heard up on this slide. There were businesses that were supportive of this project, particularly it being a pilot project and being able to try stuff out. And that is really the beauty and kind of the point of a pop-up project, is that we can find out what works, what doesn't work, and then make adjustments to the plans before they're the kind of costly infrastructure that goes in. And yeah, so speaking with businesses throughout this project would certainly be important, so we can troubleshoot what's working and what's not. Next slide. So finally, I just want to say why we're really looking at doing this in September of this year. And of course, cycling has really taken off this year. We've seen a lot of, we've heard about cycling all over the province, and particularly in the South Shore, where you guys have such lovely trails. it's really an opportunity to kind of capitalize on the new people cycling or people that are cycling more, and creating an opportunity for them to connect with downtown businesses. Of course, the other aspect of that, also COVID related, and kind of why we were looking at this option for this year, is just around the possibility of a fourth wave. So I hope that's not going to happen, but we don't know what September will bring. And this kind of gives a bit of resilience in downtown Lunenburg, an option for people if there's needs to be further shutdowns on this lovely up and down COVID life that we're all living. So that's all the information that I'm going to throw at you right now. I am sure there are questions, so I want to leave lots of time to answer them.
All right, thank you, Allison, for your presentation. I will open the floor to councilors' questions. Councilor Bertels.
Thank you. I just have the question, when you go back into the pedestrian mall, how would emergency vehicles get through there?
Sorry.
How would emergency vehicles get through that section?
So the barriers that are at the top will be separated enough, will also be separated at 3.5 meters. So the lane width will be the same as the rest of the street. It's not like people will need to get out of their cars and move stuff. People will be able to continue straight through.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'll just speak loudly. Allison, a few years ago, like probably 2014 or whatever, we did an active transportation study, and I was just wondering if you consulted this, and how does this plan that you have here now align with maybe some of the thoughts that were in that original plan?
Yes, so that plan was looked at when the original Bicycle Nova Scotia plan was created in 2019. I'm going to, I wasn't here when that happened. Kelly and Paul both were, so I'm gonna leave you time to comment if you have anything else to add to that. But I think usually I've found since I've started, when we work on these hub projects, a lot of those active transportation plans have great stuff for pedestrians, but not like a connected network for cycling. So that plan was consulted and considered in this. I don't know if either of you have anything to add.
The active transportation strategic plan was prepared in November 2013. So that one was originally included in the original Blue Route Hubs project back in 2019. So that was the core of that.
And just one more. And like now, how many parking spaces are we giving up for this project?
Yeah, so it's 22 parking spaces in the pedestrian mall and 22 for the bike lane on the rest of Montague Street. So 44 parking spaces in total.
Does that, you're finished, Deputy Mayor? Okay, I have Councillor Duggan next.
That was my question as well, was how many parking spaces we were losing for the project, so.
Any further questions from councillors on Allison's presentation? All right, seeing none, I have, Councillor Halverson.
Thanks, Allison. Again, I sat in on this, so I'm fully versed in what you've done. So first off, thanks for all the work that you and the team have done. It was, I think, a good piece of community engagement. Actually, we heard a lot of good things. The only thing that I'm not really clear on is the money we're talking about here, the $16,000, you're asking for $4,000 in kind from us, and that's the $11,000 coming from BNS.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a time limit attached to that funding? Like, does it have to be used by September 30th or anything like that?
So the funding for our time at Bicycle Nova Scotia will run out March 30th. It's possible that we could get that time again for the next fiscal year, but of course not guaranteed. And then the funding for the materials, that funding would run out June 30th of next year. That funding, we are still waiting on confirmation of that funding, which we might not get until September 16th. If we did, yeah, but you're allowed to spend money before you get that that funding, and there's other sources that we're looking at. So that funding would run out June 30th of next year. Again, opportunities to apply for different funding, but
I have Councillor Ernst and then Councillor Duggan again.
Thank you. And through the chair, I think this is just more of a point of clarity. I think it's pretty obvious in here, but I just want to be sure. And then again, this looks like a temporary trial as it is, but in the long term, there's nothing, I did see for the potential long term in Newtown, the idea of opening up some of the streets, widening them and so on. Is that something that's been considered? And if so, has it been considered that that may be impactful for the heritage designation of Old Town?
sorry, is it possible to widen Montague Street? Is that what you're
It
asking?
was that discussed, and if so, does the that could potentially have impact on the heritage designation in the original street layout? So I just wonder if that's been looked at.
I'd have to consult the report to determine if that specifically was looked at. I know the plan that because as I mentioned, the original plan changed slightly to what we've suggested for the bike lane. So in the original plan, it's a one-way bike lane on the north side, and the sidewalk gets a bit of extension for the rest of Montague Street. As I don't believe it was looked at whether the street could be widened, I think, because the space is quite constrained, and that would have a lot of different factors. And I know that also, like, making sure that there's enough sidewalk space as well is very important for accessibility.
I have Councillor Duggan, then Councillor Sanford.
I may have missed this, but was there a projected start date, and how long would it take for setup?
Yeah, so the projected start date is the 12th of September. That's a Sunday, and we'd be looking to do it all in one day. That's why we have 4 public works staff for 8 hours on that day, and would have volunteers as well to kind of put stuff together. And then the end date would be October 9th. And again, all in one day.
Councillor Sanford.
2 questions. What will success look like? Right? And then how will the project be evaluated?
So interestingly, for this project, success, there's kind of, success is learning, right? So the conversations that I mentioned earlier with businesses, with other residents, we would be looking to be here to have those conversations while the project was going at different points, and finding out what people think about that. So taking this really as an opportunity to find any pros and cons of what this looks like to different users, including businesses, including residents, including tourists. What could be improved for the final project. And then, of course, we're also looking at doing actual counts of people walking and cycling in the space. We are hoping that we're going to be able to get actual counters, so we won't have to be there. But if not, we conducted a pedal poll earlier this year, which interestingly had a ton of people from the South Shore counting people on bikes, which was amazing. But we would be kind of using that, which is just an on-app phone, to count the number of people that are cycling or walking through the space.
Councillor Halverson again.
Kind of want to jump in and partially answer Councillor Sanford's question as well, just to help you out, having read the materials. But this is a pilot project as well. It's the first of its kind in the province. So we're the guinea pigs here. And the idea is, if I'm not mistaken, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea is to bring people from the Blue Route traveling across the provinces and bring them into the town core. So it's meant to attract, those cyclists who are making use of the active corridors between communities and get them to stop in, right?
Absolutely. And it aligns with the South Shore Bike Celebration Month as well, which is happening in September. So again, just kind of using that as an opportunity to pull people that are cycling, people that are thinking about cycling into Lunenburg. Just kind of to build off that as well, I've heard from cyclists that they love to would love to kind of stop at the number 9 coffee shop after a bike ride, but it doesn't feel very safe to get there from trails. So we're kind of looking at that opportunity to bring people from the lovely trails around Lunenburg into downtown.
Any further questions from council at this stage? Seeing none, okay, Allison, my questions are, first of all, I did notice that, yeah, the bicycle route was moved from the north side to the south side. And I'm wondering what consideration was given to accessibility concerns or parking concerns by moving it to that side of the street, because all the pedestrian infrastructure is on the other side, on the south side of the street.
Yeah, so everywhere that there is current crossings, there would still be an opportunity for people to cross
Okay,
through that space. And I think the main reason of moving that bike lane was to stop kind of crossing the cross streets on the north, or on this, on the north side. So yeah, thinking about kind of accessibility from that full-on perspective, that really makes cyclists feel safe. But yeah, I think everywhere that there's kind of that dropped curb, we're looking at making sure that we're not putting another barrier for people to cross through to get to the other side of the bike lane.
Isaac? Paul?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to mention that we've been in collaboration with Michael Croft, who's the manager, traffic engineer and road safety from the province. So we have been emailing him the plan and the design just for sign off on it.
My second question is, and I think I might know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Would moving something like this to the sort of tourist off-season provide you with data that would be as effective as having it in September, or?
Yeah, I mean, tourist off-season also coincides with the kind of weather that people aren't necessarily walking and cycling in.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And just, I'm wondering if you can speak to, because I think it's important to note, the correlation between greater pedestrianization and effects on business in the long run related to, cycling and pedestrianization, and how that potentially increases or decreases, commercial activity.
Yeah, there's lots of evidence from, the UK, from Toronto, from all these different places that cyclists actually visit stores more often and spend more money in total. But, they might shop a little bit smaller at the time because they've got a little bit smaller of a vehicle, but overall are spending more money. So yes, there's evidence kind of in all these different places where bike lanes have been implemented, pedestrian malls have been implemented, that it's good for business on those streets. And in my previous experience working in a different organization, we also always found that we would do studies before and after of kind of putting in active transportation infrastructure. We would always find that businesses overestimated how many people were already kind of driving there versus the people that are already walking and cycling there. So really opening that up even more for people to travel in all these different ways to get to where they're going is certainly a benefit.
All right, and one final question. If we were to start this at the beginning of next year's active season, as opposed to at the end of this year's, when would you recommend, and what do you think the likelihood is that you could get your funding extended?
I would potentially suggest June if that's an option, because again, it would align with Bike Month for the municipality of the District of Lunenburg. Not being aware specifically of the exact tourist season of Lunenburg, as of course I'm not a resident, that would be my suggestion. And I can't obviously guarantee funding for that time, but would certainly work to try and get it.
Okay. Any further questions? Seeing none, is it anybody's pleasure to move a motion at this stage? Councillor Duggan. Yeah. So the motion to approve for September 12th? Yeah, okay. And I note the staff have a placeholder for conditions on no conditions other than the ones provided. Okay. Is there a seconder for that motion? Counselor Halverson? Just keeping counselors aware that we can defer this, amend it, procedurally do pretty much anything. Is there any discussion on the motion? Counselor Halverson?
Again, being part of the process, I mean, I understand where we're at, what we're trying to do. I think what we've come up with as a plan is fantastic. My concerns lie in the speed at which we're endeavoring to do this. I did have a chat with Jamie Myra, President of the Board of Trade, and he raised some serious concerns from his members, the fact that they haven't really, and I know you've tried to reach out, but they haven't had a chance as an organization to discuss, what this means for them, how they can best prepare for it. And that wasn't a no, but it was a we're not ready. And I think, again, I'm gonna stress, I fully believe in what this plan is. I think I'm excited to have Lunenburg be the pilot for this project. I think it's going to have ramifications up and down the province. I think it's going to be a great model. But I do agree with His Worship's questions about perhaps next season would give us the time to engage anyone who may have a stake in this, to make sure that everyone's fully prepared and fully buys into what it is we're trying to do. And I just think it's trying to rush this through. I mean, we're at August 10th now. This is just about a month away. I don't know that removing 44 spaces and not providing parking, not providing a way for visitors to adjust their patterns. I don't think that gives them this time. And especially considering the tourist season, we've already had businesses that are really just recovering. I mean, who's to say maybe the bike project would be better, but right now they know what to expect, and the known knowns are better for the business community at this point. I hesitate to put any more undue stress on a bunch of businesses who are recovering from the pandemic at this moment. So I would be in favor of amending the motion. Did you suggested June would be the better month?
I think June, yeah.
Yeah, I would suggest perhaps June would be the time to do that. That would give all of us time, give yourself time to engage with Board of Trade and any other stakeholders we can find to bring on board to help support this.
So with your indulgence, I do have Councillor Bertels and the Deputy Mayor, and then we'll circle back and you can make an amendment.
Thanks.
Councillor Bertels?
Thanks. I basically was going to echo what Councillor Halverson had to say there. I just think, yeah, I'm just like, really, could you be quiet for 5 seconds? But I personally think the timing is wrong right now. We're just getting the town back up. The stores are open. People are walking through the town. I think we need to give our businesses what they need right now, and so they need to thrive right now. So I think the timing's off.
Okay, I've got the Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, I'm pretty much a broken record here as well. I do really support the project. I think it's a great project. But, I think to do the project itself justice too, if we would delay that till June, we have the opportunity to promote it. And it is a bicycle month. So, I mean, it has a lot of synergies, and then some of the businesses may be able to get behind it, and say, you bring your bike down, you get a free French fries or a pop, or, you know what I mean, right? Really, it gives, an opportunity to incentivize. So, yeah, I support the motion.
All right, then as promised, I'll circle back to Councillor Halverson to make the amendment.
Okay, I'll just like to echo too, because some of the discussion we had in the committee was some of that engagement. I mean, bringing in the community groups that we talked about, different members, CDETs, the school, all those people. I think it would just give better credence, and we'd have better buy-in. I think we'd have a better result as well. So, so that is my motion. I would like to recommend that we move this to accept the project, but moving it to June 2022 start.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Bertels. Is there any discussion on the amendment to the main motion? Councillor Duggan?
So just curious, how would that be affecting the funding? So would the funding, obviously the funding runs out in March
Yeah.
and June. So what would happen if we do extend to June?
If we did extend to June, we would obviously put in for for the funding again to have staff time and for materials. Again, I can't guarantee that, but we would certainly work hard to try and make this happen. It's one of our priorities as well. We've been working with the town for a while, so.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. And if the month would have to change, I mean, or there was a better month, you can always come back later, presuming the main motion passes now that it's been amended. That returns us to the main motion. Are there any further amendments, discussion, or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor of the main motion as amended? Opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you, Allison, for joining us. That takes us on to item B, the proposed regional emergency management bylaw. There is a draft motion there. I don't know if staff want to speak to that at this stage.
No, your worship, it's pretty pro forma. This would be the first reading. We would advertise and with a minimum period of time, we should probably be able to hit the September 14th meeting when potentially second and final reading would be given and any public submissions.
Okay, is it anybody's pleasure to move the draft motion as presented? Moved by Councillor Ernst, seconded by Councillor Sanford. Is there any discussion or debate on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. All right, that takes us on to new business, and the first is the town general operating year end and capital funding. So I will turn the floor over to the finance director to speak to that.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this evening, there are 3 different memos before council regarding our fiscal 2020-21 year end. The auditors have been in and conducted their field work. Finance staff have drafted the financial statements, and our audit committee is scheduled for September 23rd. However, before those draft statements can be reviewed by the audit committee, there are a few motions that need to be considered by council. So the first of those is concerning the town general operations. And they are concerning the capital funding and the additional reserve transfers that staff are recommending. So for fiscal 2021, there were 2,870,000 and change of capital projects completed. And Schedule 1 of the report summarizes all the capital funding being proposed by staff. I just wanted to point out that we are fortunate in getting support from other levels of government and other sources, and that over 70% of those capital projects were funded from other sources. There is a capital borrowing noted there of $514,000 and change. That was a borrowing for our fire truck and our public works snowplow dump truck. But those were secured last fall, so there's not a motion before you about that debt. And I'm pleased to say that there's no additional borrowings, despite being in the budget. There's no additional borrowings that have to be made at this time. So that is the summary of the capital projects. I just wanted to note that if there were projects that did have to be carried over, they are noted in purple for your reference there. Then I'll move on to the Schedule 2, I guess, or do you want to do the
Well, we'll
report?
pass the motion first.
Well, there's 2 different
Oh,
motions.
yeah, the Schedule 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Schedule 2 is the other part of the motion. It's regarding additional reserve transfers. So as noted in my report, fiscal 2020-21 was certainly a challenging year with the COVID pandemic. However, we did some really prudent budgeting last spring. We've done careful departmental fiscal management, and then we were lucky enough to receive the Safe Restart funding. So we have additional funds that we can transfer to reserves as outlined in Schedule 2. Some of these we've already spoken about when we were doing our budgets for this year, because we were carrying those reserves back into this year. So the one with the $90,000 for mild winter savings and the Safe Restart funding, which at March 31st, 2021, we had anticipated would be around $115,000. It actually came in at $119,915. There are 2 other reserve transfers there that when we were doing our budgeting in the spring, we had to cut for election savings. And so we've had some funds that we've put some towards the 2024 election. There's $100,000 there for funding the finalization of the documents related to the CCP, because those weren't completed at year end, like the planning and those sort of things, because you will see funding in there for the actual comprehensive community plan. And then lastly, there is a reserve, general operating reserve transfer of $54,300, which, as council will recall, that was our one red provincial FCI that we have received in fiscal 1920. And so this is an area where we can make some improvements. So after all of that is said and done, the town still ends up with a surplus at the end of the year, which is where we'd like to be, of $1,092. And schedules 3, 4, and 5 are there for your reference of the overall operations.
Thanks to the finance director for that. There is a draft motion provided. Is it anyone's pleasure to move that motion as presented? Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Councillor Halverson. Is there any further discussion or debate or questions for Lisa? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Item B.
So then the next one is regarding our water utility. And there are some additional funds able for reserve transfer of $105,200. And we're recommending that those replenish our future land purchase reserve. And after that is done and the capital funding, which has been as budgeted, there would be a surplus in the water utility of $445.
All right. Again, there's a draft motion presented. Councillor Sanford moving the motion. Councillor Bertle seconding. Any discussion or debate or questions of Lisa? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Electric utility.
Sure. And last, it's an information report because there is no motions for council. As council will recall, the utility had a break-even budget for 2020-21. With the COVID pandemic and the mild winter, the utility did have lower sales than anticipated when we budgeted. Therefore, they had lower profits to cover their fixed operating costs. However, they did end the year with a modest surplus of $2,804, and that is just for council's information.
Thanks to the finance director. That takes us on to item D, a Blue Nose 100 committee noise bylaw exemption request. There's a letter and draft motion. I don't know if the CAO wants to speak to that.
Your worship. Everything seems to be in order, your worship. Their application is complete. They have certificates of insurance, a very good plan for the event. They indicated that they would be notifying adjacent properties of their intentions to go beyond the time limits. So everything seems to be in order for council to consider an exemption. And this is done pursuant to the bylaw. It's not something that staff is authorized to approve at times, thankfully so, I would say. Rather, it comes to council for your consideration.
Thank you, B. Anyone's pleasure to move that motion? Moved by the deputy mayor, seconded by Councillor Bertles. I think I had it out of the corner of my eye. Any discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Takes us on to item E, a special event permit application from the Board of Trade. I will look to the CAO to speak again to that.
Similarly, your worship, everything is in order. The application is complete. There is a request for in-kind contributions by or services by the Public Works Department to help us do the road closure, a bit of traffic rerouting, and then to reverse all that when the event is finished, either on the upcoming Saturday or Sunday. That's their rain date. It seems to be a great tradition to be able to reestablish, and staff is recommending approval, your worship.
Thank you. Again, a draft motion is presented, moved by Councillor Ernst, seconded by Councillor Bertles. Any discussion or debate? Councillor Halverson.
I think Paul jumped out here though. Something that came up in our bicycles discussion was the talk about the extra garbage and recycling bins that get placed. Do we incur an extra charge when we move those, or is that just, like, who empties that? Or do we, like, does GFI have to come in and we have to spend an extra charge on that, or how does that work?
I'll look to staff.
We have, your worship, a dumpster at the Public Works Building and the ability to store recyclables and compost materials. So those are usually taken off site and stored securely and then picked up during our regular collection. Or there's other ways that that is properly dealt with, depending on the volume. So usually doesn't present any problems, and we're pleased to help with these special events as they have their restart.
Okay, and that's so that the town staff will pick it up at the end of the night, take it to the dump or whatever, and then, or the bins, and then they picked up as usual. Okay. Okay. Great.
Okay. Any further questions? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Now we have the late breaking request from the Salt Box Brewery, and we're fortunate to have people in the Salt Box here to join us. Should we have any questions of them? I'll pass the floor first to the CEO to speak to that.
Thanks, your worship. I don't have anything in particular to advise, except again, council has the authority to grant a specific exemption under the bylaw. And we always thank groups, and whether it's a nonprofit or in this case, a corporation that comes forward and asks in advance for permission. It's greatly appreciated. I think that the company is making sure the public knows ahead of time as much as possible. We had a couple of concerns that were raised by local residents, but I think they've been addressed adequately and with enough prior notice. This is a special occasion request, and it's recommended for council approval by staff. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe just for the public's benefit, you can note the date, given that it doesn't appear on the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry, your worship. It's Labor Day weekend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Would anybody like to move that motion? Moved by Councillor Duggan, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Questions, discussion, debate. Councillor Halverson.
Perennial first question guy. Actually, I'll be honest, I just more of a comment. The last session seemed to go pretty well. I could pretty clearly hear it from my place up the top of the hill on the first couple nights, but not the second couple nights. So can you fix that this time through? That would be. Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm not complaining. It's jamming along to Bahamas. It was great. No, actually, I will say that I think it's a great function, and it brings people to the water from both sides, as a matter of fact, and a lot of people in the cheap seats on the water, which is fun too. So it's just fun to get the community involved. So I'd like to support the effort.
Thank you, Councillor Halverson. Any further discussion or debate? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. And there being no further business before us tonight, I'll